Hey, it's Matt, your average gamer, and for this video, we're going to be ranking the weapon classes. And not only will we be ranking the weapon classes, we're going to be coming up with the best builds for each class too, and talking about them in great detail. This is going to be really different from what I normally do because there's going to be a lot of different builds in here that I don't normally cover. Some of the stuff I've covered before, obviously, some of the best builds for each class are going to be pretty straightforward, but we've got whips, the jar cannon, bows, a whole bunch of different things in this one. I'm really excited to dive into this one. After the intro, we're going to jump right in. We have 30 different weapon classes to go over. We didn't include the torch class or the class for the tools and stuff and whatnot as well, although St. Trina's torch does make an appearance later in this video. This is weapon classes ranked with builds. We're going to be jumping, by the way, into Journey 38 for this one. Let's go. And at number 30, we have the Whip class. The Whip class is really disappointing for me as a whole. I do not like the movesets on them. I feel like they're slow, but they don't make up for that in damage. They're really awkward to use, and often they look like they're going to go further than they actually hit. I would say Haslow's whips are probably the best in the whip class as a whole, but the class itself is just really disappointing. You can get decent bleed buildup with these, so that's a plus, but overall, having the slow move set and relatively low damage makes them a bad option. I hope in DLC they improve on some previous classes too. If they improve on the whip class, that would be excellent. I know we're going to be getting 8 new weapon types, but hopefully they can add on to some of these ones that are a little bit weaker too. Let's jump into equipment. For equipment, we have 2 of Haslow's whips. I have Royal Knights Resolved on them. In Blood Affinity, we have the Dragon Communion Seal, White Mask, Ritual Swords Talisman, Lord of Blood's Exaltation, Melissa's Prosthesis, Axe Talisman, Spike Crack Tier, and Faith Tier. Now, the reason I went for the Axe Talisman was because they're not really fast enough to build up on successive hits, so I was going to try to mix in charge attacks, but those aren't great either. Here's my stats for this one. And next up here at number 29, we have Crossbows. These are more of a side weapon. They're not going to be something that you pretty much use on your own all the time for the majority of bosses in the game because the damage is relatively low and overall the bolts don't do that much. Yeah, it's just kind of a side option for the majority of people that are playing this game. You're really not going to use this as a main weapon too often. Now, they are decent as a side weapon overall. If you want to add this onto something else, it could be pretty good. It can give you a little bit of bleed buildup from a range, but overall the damage is relatively low. And that's why I have this in the number 29 spot, because it makes sense to put it here. This isn't something that's going to do anything incredible in terms of damage, regardless of changing bolts, by the way. You could use regular bolts, bleed bolts, you could do whatever you want with the crossbows, and overall you're still going to take a little bit of time to take any of the bosses down in the game. Let's jump into equipment. For equipment, we have the Arbalest, which is, I guess how you say it, I don't know. It's probably the best in the class. Any seal for buffs, you can check out the armor set. Bleed bolts we have. We have the Arrows, Sting, and Reach Talisman, Ritual Swords Talisman, Lord of Blood's Exaltation, Green Burst Crystal Tier, Faith Tier. Now, you can check out my stats. I ran it as a quality build, but this doesn't really scale with much. A lot of the stuff early on this list doesn't, as we continue with the first couple. Another weapon at number 28, we have Ballistas, and that is the Jar Cannon. That doesn't scale with anything either, and really around what you're going to be able to boost really is going to be pretty much the Lightning Bolts are the most you could boost, I think, with a Lightning Scorpion Charm and Lightning Tier, but overall you're going to get between 800 and 1,000 damage for the most part consistently. And that's not to say it's bad. It could be a decent range option to take out mobs and stuff, but as a whole, would you use the Jar Cannon against the majority of tough bosses in Elden Ring? Probably not. It's really slow for the amount of damage you're getting. By the way, the lightning bolts can do lightning damage, but the explosive bolts, believe it or not, do not do fire damage. It's purely physical, and it's not going to be boosted by the Fire Scorpion Charm or the Flame Tier. And I can honestly say I tested it and didn't see any increase. I did see an increase, though, boosting the lightning bolts, so I went with them. I'm not sure if they're technically the best, but since you can boost them a little bit, they seem to be better. Let's jump into equipment. And we have the Jar Cannon, we have the Lightning Greatbolt, we have any seal for buffs. You can check out our armor set there. We have the Arrows, Reach, and Sting Talisman. We have the Ritual Swords Talisman, Lightning Scorpion Charm, Lightning Tier, and Faith Tier. At number 27, we have short bows. Now, short bows don't really impress me too much in terms of damage, even with Barrage. Barrage is decent on them, though, because they are lightweight. You could also jump and shoot them relatively quick. They can build up status effects quick, but again, another secondary weapon. Yeah, this is not going to be one that you're going to keep and use for the majority of Elden Ring, but if you want something for a backup to use against mobs, or if you want to start a boss fight by using something like the Rot Arrows for quick status effect buildup, or if you want to add bleed while you're at a distance, these can do that. Light bows aren't bad with that, and Barrage is solid. Let's jump into equipment. And we have the Red Branch Short Bow. We're using the Blood Bone Arrows and the Rod Arrows. Any seal for buffs. You can check out the armor set. We had the same armor set for the first couple on here. We have the Arrow Sting Talisman, Lord of Blood's Exaltation, Ritual Swords Talisman, Arrow's Reach Talisman, Green Burst Crystal tier, Fate tier. And for stats, you can run a lot of the bow builds as quality builds. We have 60 Dexterity, 30 Strength, which is 45 when we're two-handing this. We have 60 Vigor, 20 Mind, 26 Endurance, 25 Faith with the Fate tier. And at number 26, we have regular bows. For the regular bows in Elden Ring, I like the horn bow because it has some intelligent scaling. After you use frost arrows to get the extra damage debuff, you can then use the dwelling arrows to get some decent numbers with rain of arrows. Yeah, to be honest, it's really not that bad, especially for some of the bigger bosses in the game. Now, the Greatbows are better, though. We will talk about them shortly, and they do work for bigger targets. Now, we have the Horn Bow, and then we have the Dwelling Arrows and Cold Bone Arrows. We have the Golden Vow Ash of War. Any seal for the physical damage portion, increase it with Flame Grant Me Strength. We have the same armor set on. Arrow, Sting, Talisman, Shard of Alexander, Ritual Sword Talisman, Magic Scorpion Charm, Magic Tier, Fate Tier. Let's talk about stats. Once again, same setup because bows can be run as a quality build, solid stats. And at number 25, we have Greatbows. Greatbows are really amazing for larger targets, especially the Lion's Greatbow with Rain of Arrows is really destructive. You get the extra damage boost too when you use Radahn's arrows, so there's a big bonus there as well. Also, if you're wondering why I'm going through these really fast, or at least some of the early ones and whatnot, it's mainly because there's so many of these, there's 30 of these, and I wanted to keep the video at a reasonable pace, rank these, and show off some builds in the process. I'm also currently sick, if you could hear it in my voice. Hopefully I get better within the next couple of days before I do the big video on all of the Ashes of War. I plan on doing that before DLC, and that's going to be all of them. There's a lot. I think there's 80 or 90 or something, so that's going to be a pretty crazy video. Yeah, that one's probably going to be like an hour, hour and a half, something like that. We're going to cover every Ash of War in the game, which is going to be pretty incredible. Anyways, back to the Lion's Greatbow. It's a phenomenal weapon for big targets in the game. You can see on a Duela here, we took a Duela out really fast because it just shreds them. It shreds the bigger targets, and it has a really wide arc on the Ash. Let's jump into equipment. And for equipment, we have Radahn's Greatbow for probably plus 10. We have Radahn's Arrows, Golden Great Arrows. Any seal for buff, same armor set on there. We have the Arrow Sting Talisman, Shard of Alexander, Ritual Swords Talisman, Arrow's Reach Talisman, Magic Tier, Fate Tier. Let's talk about stats. Probably don't need the Magic Tier because I think it's mostly physical damage and just a little bit of magic damage. We have Golden Vow, Flame Grant Me Strength, 60 Vigor, 60 Dex, 30 Strength. And at number 24, we have Flails, another excellent backup weapon. As a main weapon, I'm not a huge fan of Flails themselves, but if you use it as a backup weapon on a Dex build, or if you go with the Chain Link Flail, I think it has an S and heavy affinity. It works really well with Blood Flame Blade and Spinning Weapon. For equipment, we have the Flail and Keen Affinity with Spinning Weapon. We have any seal for buffs using Blood Flame Blade, of course. White Mask, we have Shard of Alexander, Ballistas Prosthesis, Lord of Blood's Exaltation, Ritual Swords Talisman, Thorny Tier, Fate Tier. And for stats on this one, we have 60 Vigor, 22 Mind, 26 Endurance. We have 75 Dexterity with Ballistas Prosthesis, 25 Faith with the Fate Tier, and then we're using Golden Vow, Flame Grant Me Strength, and Blood Flame Blade. And at number 23, we have Heavy Thrusting Swords. I know a lot of people like the Bloody Hellas. It's a really good weapon for PvP, by the way, but unfortunately on New Game Plus 7, it falls off a lot, so I decided to use the Stitcher with Giant Hunt instead, and honestly, I was pretty impressed with the damage. You don't need the White Mask, by the way. I didn't use it in Blood Affinity. I actually tried this weapon out first on a different build using it in Blood Affinity. The bleed build-up was relatively slow. I just left the White Mask on. You do not need it for this build. As far as the Heavy Thrusting Sword class themselves, the weapon moveset's kind of awkward. They fall in a little bit of an awkward place, but they do good poise damage, and then you could use something like Giant Hunt to really increase the damage. And we do get a posture break towards the end here. Now, you can use these as decent weapons against a bunch of different bosses in the game, but in the late game, I'm not a huge fan of these. We have the Keen Godskin Stitcher, and then we have it with Giant Hunt, any seal for buffs, so we hit 51 poise. We have the Shard of Alexander, Melissan's Prosthesis, Ritual Sword and Shield Talisman. We have the Successive Attack tier for the regular hits on it, and then we have the Fate tier. Yeah, that's excessive attack tier. The thorny tier is probably optional there. 60 vigor, we have 75 dexterity, Ballistas, prosthesis, golden vow, and flame grim strength. Number 22, we have a class of weapons that feels a little bit awkward at times, much like heavy thrusting swords, and that is axes. Axes can be good, but they tend to have a short reach, and there's really only a couple standouts that I like a lot, and Roses' axe is one of them. Yeah, this weapon's really good. Its Ash of War is pretty great. It has pretty even strength and intelligence scaling. When you see the spirits there, they're going to be intelligence scaling, and then the weapon itself, the contact with it's going to be physical and strength scaling. Overall, it's pretty split between the two, and you can get a lot of damage out of Roses' axe. It's honestly a pretty underrated weapon, but the class as a whole is fairly limited. We have Roses' axe preferably plus 10. We're using the Golden Vow Ash of War. Any staff for Terra Magica. The Spellblade set will boost part of this. And we have the Shard of Alexander, Magic Scorpion Charm, Ritual Sword and Shield Talisman, Magic tier, and Strength tier. Let's talk about stats. So I did this on what's basically a pure intelligence build. We're hitting 45 strength though with the Strength tier, and then you could still run 80 intelligence and Lucette's staff and 50 vigor, and we're using Terra Magica. At number 21, we have Straight Swords. Now, Straight Swords you're not going to see many builds on, and there's a reason for that. They're simply outclassed by a lot of other weapons in Elden Ring, but with all that said, they could still be really good too, and the Sword of Night and Flame is one that's especially good. Yeah, this is probably a little bit of an underrated class. I like it, but it's not that popular. We have the Sword of Night and Flame, plus 10, Lucette's Staff for Terra Magica, any seal for buffs. The Spellblade set will boost the beam. We have the Shard of Alexander, Magic Scorpion Charm, Ritual Sword and Shield Talisman, Magic tier, Fate tier. Let's jump into stats for this build. And for this build, we have 60 Vigor, we have 60 Intelligence, 34 Faith with the Faith tier. We're more focused on the beam here, and we have Golden Vow, Halberds, Terra Magica to buff. And the next one up here is Daggers. Now, if you run 2 Daggers together, 2 Reduvias, 2 Bloodstained Daggers is a really good combination. You can get a lot of bleed build up and damage, but the problem is they have a really short reach and relatively low AR. They can make up for that by being quick a little bit, but they're definitely lower on the list here. Let's jump into equipment. For equipment, we have the Reduvia plus 10, we have the Dragon Communion Seal, White Mask, you don't need the Raptor's Black Feathers, Ritual Sword and Shield Talisman, Lord of Blood's Exaltation, Shard of Alexander, Greenburst Crystal tier, Faith tier. And we have 60 Vigor, we have 40 Dexterity, we have 45 Arcane, 25 Faith with the Faith tier, and we're using Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength to buff this build. And at number 19, we have Thrusting Swords, regular Thrusting Swords, with the Anspear Rapiers really standing out because you can get Rot, Poison, and Bleed with this build. Now, something to note here about the Anspear Rapiers is they're a standout among the class. The class as a whole, especially if you go for Blood or Poison Affinity, you're going to have really low AR in terms of the regular Thrusting Swords in the game, and that's why they're lower on this list. Yeah, much like Daggers, you can make up for that with fast attacking, but we have ones later on this list like Twinblades and Curved Swords with jump attacks that just do so much more damage than these classes that they're simply outclassed by better, faster weapons. Let's jump into equipment, stats, everything you need to know. And we have 2 Anspear Rapiers. We have 1 with Seppuku and Blood Affinity, 1 with Poison Affinity, White Mask, you don't need the Raptor's Black Feathers, Kindred Rot's Exaltation, Lord of Blood's Exaltation, Ballistas Prosthesis, Rotten Wing Sword Insignia, Thorny tier, Faith tier. And we have 60 Vigor, we have 45 Dexterity, even though these are pretty much quality, Strength can give you some decent points too, 45 Arcane, 25 Faith with the Faith tier, Golden Vow, Flame Grant Me Strength. And next up we have Spears. Now, Spears aren't really an excellent class for PvE. They have good range, so there's a plus there, but much like heavy thrusting swords, you may find yourself having difficulty overall with the moveset, but they do offer the Bolt of Grandsex, which is a phenomenal weapon. Yeah, it's an amazing weapon for pure lightning damage. It's chargeable, and the range on it is absolutely absurd too, so that's a huge bonus there. But overall, the Spear class themselves, as far as regular hitting with the weapons and whatnot, there are better options higher on this list. They're just okay. And I know some people are going to disagree with the placement on these, but after around 2,000 hours of Elden Ring at this point, I'm right pretty much exactly about 2,000 hours since the game's been released. This is just from my own personal experiences and how I find weapons to be good or not, and they kind of land right in the middle for me. Let's jump into equipment. And we have the Bolt of Grandsex, preferably plus 10. Any seal for this one. You don't need the Raptor's Black Feathers, I just kept it on. Shard of Alexander, Ritual Swords, Talisman, Godfrey Icon is chargeable, Lightning Scorpion Charm, Lightning tier, Faith tier. And for stats on this one, it's mainly dexterity on the Ash of War. That's going to be the big part there. So 65 dexterity, 33 faith with a faith here, so we can use Halberds, Golden Vow, and 60 vigor. And at number 17, we have Great Spears. Now, Great Spears can be really good because they have Mogwin's Sacred Spear, which is one of the best weapons in the game. But aside from that, the moveset for the class specifically itself just isn't that good. Much like the regular spears, the issue here is you're going to have a lot of slow-moving forward attacks, and it is good in terms of range and stuff, but especially when you're on New Game Plus and beyond, a lot of times you're just not going to be able to build up much damage aside from the Ashes of War. So that's why I put them here in this spot, and I think they do belong in this spot overall, but Mogwin's Sacred Spear is obviously one of the best weapons in the entire game, and if you've never tried it before, definitely do so. Let's jump into equipment. And we have Mogwin's Sacred Spear plus 10, we have the Dragon Communion Seal, White Mask, Shard of Alexander, Ritual Swords Talisman, Lord of Blood's Exaltation, Fire Scorpion Charm, Flame Tier, and Faith Tier. And for stats on this one, we have 60 Vigor, 45 Strength, we have 45 Arcane. If you want to pump up Arcane for the Ash, it'll do even more damage, Golden Vow, and Flame Grip and Strength. And next up on this list at number 16, we have Fist Weapons, a really popular class of weapons for many people, by the way. However, their short reach can actually cause them to just flat out miss some of the bosses in the game, specifically the tree avatars, which the hitboxes seem to be really hard to hit with Fist Weapons. But if you put Bloodflame Blade on them, and then of course if you're using the charged attacks, combining in jump attacks, etc., you do get a lot of poise damage, and even here on New Game Plus 7, I do end up getting a posture break because they do build up poise damage substantially, and the Star Fist are a standout among the class. And there's our nice posture break there. That's one thing you could definitely get. The Starfists have the innate bleed on them too, so you get a little extra bleed build up even if you're using charged attacks. In a second here, we're going to go over equipment, stats, everything you need to know. For equipment, we have the Starfist and Heavy Affinity. We're using Bloodflame Blade. We have the Claw Mark Seal. We have the White Mask, Lord of Blood's Exaltation, Erdtree's Favorite plus 2, Ritual Swords Talisman, Axe Talisman, Spike Crack Tier, and Faith Tier. And for stats, we have 60 Vigor, we have 66 Strength, 25 Faith with the Faith Tier, Golden Vow, Flame Grant Me Strength, and Bloodflame Blade. And at number 15, we have Greataxes. Greataxes can be really good. We're getting into the really good classes now. They have the Rusted Anchor. You throw Wild Strikes on it, you're going to get phenomenal damage. And then a lot of the other weapons, like I enjoy the Executioner's Great Axe, have pretty good movesets and damage. Yeah, overall, this is a pretty solid class. I like this class. It's getting into the point now where a lot of these are going to be ones that have really good standouts too. The Rusted Anchor is great. Let's jump into equipment. And we have the Rusted Anchor and Heavy Affinity with Wild Strikes. Any seal for buffs, we have 51 Poise, Shard of Alexander, Erdtree's Favorite plus 2, Ritual Swords Talisman, Rotten Wing Sword Insignia, Thorny Tier, Faith Tier. And for stats, we have 60 Vigor, 23 Mind, 32 Endurance, 66 Strength, 25 Faith with the Faith Tier, 15 Dexterity, and we are using Golden Vow and Flame Grip Me Strength to buff this good build. Yeah, that's a really reliable one. And another reliable class is Greathammers. Now, Greathammers can do a lot of posture damage even on New Game Plus 7. Of course, we're going to show off the bubble build here because the Envoy's Longhorn is the best, but if you're doing regular charge attacks, they do good poise damage too. Yeah, one of the few classes, there's a couple of classes that really stand out in terms of moveset being able to posture break, especially for later on with New Game Plus and beyond. And even on New Game, Greathammers is one of them. Grab any Great Hammer, do charged attacks, you'll get great damage. And then of course they have the Envoy's Longhorn, which can destroy big targets. And we're going to jump into equipment and stats here. Of course, we got to use the bubbles one more time. This is a fun one. We have the Envoy's Longhorn plus 10. We have the Erdtree Seal. You could check out the armor set, Tree Sentinel set mostly. We have the Shard of Alexander, Ritual Swords Talisman, Sacred Scorpion Charm, Erdtree's Favorite plus 2, Holy Tier, and Faith Tier. And now for stats on this one, we have 60 Vigor, 22 Mind, 26 Endurance, we have 16 Strength, 17 Dexterity, 80 Faith with the Faith Tier, Golden Vow, and Halberds. And at number 13, we have hammers. We're going to show off America's hammer, and if you're wondering why hammers are so good, there's something interesting about hammers if you didn't know. And here's the thing, so they did a massive posture nerf a while back on all the posture damage for pretty much all the weapons in the game. The only one that received a bonus rather than a buff is two-handed regular hammers, and they're great for posture breaking. We have America's Hammer plus 10, any seal for buffs. We have 51 Poise, Shard of Alexander, Sacred Scorpion Charm, Ritual Sword and Shield Talisman, Holy Tier, and Strength Tier. Don't forget, I went through these quick to keep it at a good pace, but you can slow this stuff down, I believe, on YouTube. 60 Vigor, 50 Strength, 50 Faith, Golden Vow, Halberds. And at number 12, we have Halberds. Halberds are really impressive in the sense that there's a lot of different Ashes of War you could use on them. Here we have a Keen Guardian Sword Spear with Ice Spear, but you could put Sword Dance on this, Giant Hunt on them. They have a lot of versatility in terms of Ashes of War. Yeah, and the Guardian Sword Spear is one of the most versatile weapons in the entire game. It's one of my favorite weapons. People that follow my channel know I love this weapon. Its AR, its base damage, and pretty much every affinity is insane. And the class as a whole, the versatility with Ashes, it's just so good. And for equipment, we have the Guardian Sword Spear and Keen Affinity with Ice Spear. Any seal for buffs, the Spellblade set will boost this. We have the Shard of Alexander, Ritual Sword Talisman, Dragoncrest Great Shield Talisman, Magic Scorpion Charm, Magic Tier, Faith Tier, Market Shackle was used to stun the boss. A lot of people ask about that item. We have 60 Vigor, 65 Dexterity, 33 Faith with the Faith Tier, 25 Endurance, Golden Vow, Halberds. And at number 11, we have Claws. Claws can get a ton of bleed buildup. That's why I put them this high on the list. And if you use Bloodhound's Claws and Heavy Affinity, they have reasonable AR. And with Bloodflame Blade, you're going to get around 100 in terms of bleed, which is insane. Yeah, these can absolutely shred. After that buff a while back, I think around 1.08 or so, they made Claws so much better with the buff, the AR buff, damage, and everything. They really are good, and I have no problem putting them at the number 11 spot, just outside the top 10. Let's jump into equipment. And we have Bloodhound's Claws and Heavy Affinity, any Ash on them. We have the Clawmark Seal, White Mask, Ritual Sword and Shield Talisman, Lord of Blood's Exaltation, Rotten Wing Sword Insignia, Thorny Tier, and Faith Tier. And for stats on this one, we're a strength build again, so we have a strength stat. 66 strength, 60 vigor, 25 faith with the faith tier. We're using Golden Vow, Flame Grant Me Strength, and Bloodflame Blade to buff this. At number 10, we have Curved Greatswords. Curved Greatswords are actually really good. Bloodhound's Fang obviously makes this higher on the list, but overall, you've got a really good move set. I like the move set. I like the jump attacks too with these as well. Yeah, they're actually quite good. If you combine Bloodhound's Fang and Morgoth's Cursed Sword, if you can manage to get the stats for that, it's a little hard at rune level 150. As you get higher up, it's definitely more doable, but they're a good combination. They combine really well together, and they do good jump attack damage too. Specifically, Bloodhound's Fang has excellent jump attack damage. And now we're going to jump into equipment. We have Bloodhound's Fang plus 10. We're using Bloodflame Blade. Any seal for buffs. We are using the White Mask, Raptor's Black Feather, Shard of Alexander, Lord of Blood's Exaltation, Ritual Sword and Shield Talisman, Strength Tier, and Faith Tier. And for stats, we have 60 Vigor, 20 Mind, 26 Endurance, 40 Strength, 60 Dexterity, 25 Faith with a Faith Tier, Golden Vow, Flame Grant Me Strength, and Bloodflame Blade. And at number 9, we have the Reaper class. The Reaper class is phenomenal in terms of damage and bleed buildup, specifically with spinning weapons, spinning strikes, and having the Grave Scythe, which again is one of the best weapons in the game. Definitely moves it up on this list. I know, it's not the Blasphemous Blade. Is it the absolute best weapon in the game? No, but it's really versatile. You could put Sword Dance on it. You could put Spinning Weapon on it, Spinning Strikes. There's so much you could do with Bloodflame Blade and the Grave Scythe for massive damage. In the class as a whole, the regular moveset's fine. The charge attacks are pretty good. They have decent reach. I like the scythes as a whole. The Reapers are solid, and the Grave Scythe is certainly a standout. Let's jump into equipment. For equipment, we have the Grave Scythe and Heavy Affinity with Spinning Weapon. We have the Clawmark Seal, White Mask, Ritual Shield Talisman, Shard of Alexander, Lord of Blood's Exaltation, Rotten Wing Sword Insignia, Thorny Tier, Faith Tier. And we have 60 Vigor for this one, 66 Strength, 15 Faith, 25 with the Faith Tier once you use it, 32 Endurance, we have Golden Vow, Flame Grant Me Strength, and Bloodflame Blade. And we have 60 Vigor for most of these, by the way, besides the Mage stuff. It is definitely good to have on New Game Plus and beyond. At number 8, we have Katanas, and Katanas are an excellent class with pretty good moveset overall, and then, of course, being able to put Double Slash on the Nagakiba is basically what the Rivers of Blood used to be. Okay, maybe not that broken, but still really good. The starting Katana or Nagakiba with Double Slash or Sword Dance and Bloodflame Blade are definitely standouts. We're going to jump into equipment, stats, and everything you need to know for this build. And we have the Nagakiba plus 25 with Double Slash and Keen Affinity. We have any seal for buffs. We have the White Mask, hit 51 Poise, Shard of Alexander, Rotten Wing Sword Insignia, Lord of Blood's Exaltation, Ritual Swords Talisman, Thorny Tier, Faith Tier. And we have 60 Vigor, 22 Mind, 26 Endurance. We have 70 Dexterity, 25 Faith, Golden Vow, Flame Grip Strength, Bloodflame Blade. And next up at number 7, we have Colossal Weapons, which includes the Giant Crusher, of course, one of the best weapons in the game in my opinion, has massive AR, and Prelate's Infernal Crozier is also very good. This class of weapon focuses on big hits. They're going to be really slow, but the AR and damage is great. But the good thing about these weapons is even on New Game Plus and beyond, base game, everything as a whole, they do a lot of damage consistently and they're very reliable. Yeah, they're one of those things where they don't really drop off too much. They do a ton of damage, and the Giant Crusher is really absurd with Royal Knight's Resolve. Let's jump into equipment and stats. And for equipment, we have the Heavy Giant Crusher with Royal Knight's Resolve. We have the Claw Mark Seal. We have the Ritual Shield Talisman. We have the Arsenal Charm +1, or Great Jar's Arsenal works. Ritual Sword Talisman, Axe Talisman, Spike Crack Tier, Fate Tier. And for stats on this one, we're a strength build. We have 99 strength when we're two-handing this with the 1.5 times bonus, 32 endurance, 60 vigor, golden vow, flame brimmer strength. In number 6, we have Colossal Swords, and this one's high up because, honestly, it has Guts Greatsword, which is incredibly versatile. There's a ton of great Ashes of War for it. Giant Hunt, Lion's Claw, Earthshaker's really good on it too. It's a very solid class. Another good one is the Zweihander, which you can use several different Ashes of War like Giant Hunt on, and it also has a good thrusting animation on the R2 as well that can be really helpful. Let's jump into equipment. We have Guts Greatsword and Heavy Affinity with Lion's Claw, any seal for buffs. We have the Raptor's Black Feathers for regular jump attacks, Shard of Alexander, Erdtree's Favorite +2, Ritual Sword and Shield Talisman, Green Burst Crystal Tier, Fate Tier. We have 60 Vigor, 66 Strength, 99 when we're two-handing this, 25 Faith with the Fate Tier, and of course we're using Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength for buffs. And at number 5 is Twinblades, which is a great class for bleed builds because the bleed build up on them is insane. The Gargoyle Twinblades are probably the best, but the Godskin Peelers and the Twin Knight Swords are really good too. Twinblades overall are excellent. Let's jump into equipment. This is a class that people love. We have 2 Gargoyle Twinblades with Seppuku on them and Blood Affinity. We have the Claw Mark Seal, White Mask, Raptor's Black Feathers. We have the Claw Talisman, Ritual Sword Talisman, Lord of Blood's Exaltation, Rottenwing Sword Insignia, Thorny Tier, Fate Tier. And we have 60 Vigor, 45 Strength, and we have 45 Arcane too. We have 25 Faith with the Fate Tier, 26 Endurance, Golden Vow, Flame Grant Me Strength. And next up on this list is Greatswords. I combined the torches in here, by the way. If you count them as a class, they would probably be last on the list because there's not a lot you could do with them. But we use St. Trina's torch here for sleep, and it's really good for that overall. I combined it with the Blasphemous Blade. It was pretty cool using this in combination. But of course, we're not here to show off the torch. We're here to talk about Greatswords. And the Blasphemous Blade definitely moves up this list a little bit because the Blasphemous Blade is so good, probably the best weapon in the game. But the class overall is also good. The Iron Greatsword's good. There's several Greatswords in the game that have good AR and a solid moveset. I mean, you have the Blasphemous Blade in the same class as the Darkmoon Greatsword. Obviously, we've got to count that, no question about it. And then reasonable weight for the amount of damage you're getting for most of the class and a decent moveset too makes this easily into the top 5. Yeah, truly an exceptional class, and I think it's going to be a really popular class in terms of what people use too, and not just because of the Blasphemous Blade and Darkmoon Greatsword, but because of the damage you're getting per the weight and the different Ashes of War and stuff you could put on a lot of the Greatswords. I really enjoy the Iron Greatsword, by the way. The base damage is great. Okay, I probably said great a lot. By the way, the St. Trina's Torch for the Godskin Duo or the Godskin Apostle and Godskin Noble, the Noble here, it's really good for them, by the way. You don't necessarily need the sleeping pots. If you use it and it's on the floor, it'll just build up sleep on them and they'll eventually go to sleep. It could be an effective method for them. Now you got to get closer than the sleeping pots, but the other one, the Godskin Apostle, actually dodges the sleeping pots, so St. Trina's Torch might actually be the better option there, or the weapon itself is good too. Let's jump into equipment. For equipment, we have the Blasphemous Blade +10. We're using St. Trina's Torch. We have the Knight's Cavalry set on Altered. We have the Phlox Canvas Talisman if you want to add in incantations. Ritual Sword Talisman, Fire Scorpion Charm, Shard of Alexander, Flame Tier, Faith Tier. And for stats, we have 60 Vigor, 22 Mind, 26 Endurance. We have 80 Faith with the Faith Tier, so you could use any incantations too. Golden Vow, Halberds. So now you can move this list to 28 and just go down from there if you don't include seals and staffs, but I did include them in this video for one, to get a build for them, but also because some people include them in weapon categories, and for this one we're showing off the Erdtree seal at 150. And now the Erdtree seal is a good universal seal. It's not going to beat stacking the boost for a lot of them. If you have 2 Gravelstone seals, that's better, even the Gravelstone seal and the Jellyfish shield. But if you want to run a versatile seal that can pretty much do anything and put a passive boost in the offhand, the Erdtree seal is great. By the way, I recently tested at rune level 150 with 80 faith the Erdtree seal and the Jellyfish shield versus a Gravelstone seal and the Jellyfish shield using Lightning Spear, and Lightning Spear did more damage on the Gatefront soldiers, the dragons in Caelid, and the troll at Stormville. So the Erdtree seal isn't necessarily majorly better, but it's pretty close to the ones with the boost, and I believe it'll probably beat the boost for Black Flame since that's only 10%. I'm not sure on that one because I didn't test that, but overall it is a very good universal seal. In a second here, we're going to go over equipment and stats. By the way, this mini boss is in Caelid by the second Erdtree. It's underneath it. You can actually use the Spirit's Ring to get there. Erdtree seal, Gravelstone seal. We have the Tree Sentinel set on, Flux Canvas Talisman, Ritual Swords Talisman, Lightning Scorpion Charm, Godfrey Icon, Lightning Tier, and Faith Tier. And we have 60 Vigor. We have 80 Faith with the Faith Tier. We're using Ancient Dragon, Lightning Strike, Black Flame, Golden Vow, and Hellish Rebury. And next up, once again, if you include seals and staffs, at rune level 150, I like Lucette's staff the best here. I think this is excellent at rune level 150. It has really high scaling. If you're at a high level, the Prince of Death staff, just like the Golden Order seal, will be better, but this is a very good staff. With 80 intelligence, you'll have around 413 scaling. And I hit Comet Azura at an angle there, but this is a Comet Azura build, as you could tell, and it does a lot of damage. We were able to take down Lanciax. And we have Lucette's staff, we have the Golden Vow Ash of War, Jellyfish Shield, we have 51 Poise, we have the Graven Mask Talisman, Magic Scorpion Charm, Godfrey Icon was in there by mistake, Ritual Swords Talisman, Magic Tier, and the Infinite FP Tier. You can replace the Godfrey Icon with the Graven School Talisman. It's going to include Shard Spiral. We have 80 Intelligence, 50 Vigor, Terra Magica, Comet Azura. And my favorite class for anything in the game is Curved Swords. I did a build for the Bandit Curved Swords in Blood here. I'm going to explain that one in a second. And then a second build I'm going to show off too, where you could use them in Flame Art. But I'm going to talk about the versatility and everything when it comes to Curved Swords and why I like them so much. So Curved Swords for me have really good hitboxes for one. They do a lot of physical damage. I like the Scavenger Curved Swords. I like the Bandits. There's a lot I like about the Curved Sword class. The jump attack damage is insane on bleed builds. At max level, by the way, the Curved Sword damage on the Bandit Curved Swords is ridiculous. Yeah, at max, the Bandits actually have the highest AR of any Curved Sword, and they actually get competitive with a lot of the other heavier classes too, because they just do so much physical damage and the amount of bleed buildup you can get. They're really great. And you can put them in Flame Art and Sacred and get a B scaling too. And that's for the Bandit Curved Swords. And then, of course, you have a lot of other ones, too. The Scavenger Curved Swords are incredibly versatile, having really good occult scaling with that B, just getting a lot of damage and bleed build up on them, too, where you could just basically jump your way to victory. And then a lot of people like things like the Beastman Curved Swords, too, which have really good strength scaling. And then if you're not doing jump attacks, the regular moveset's pretty good on them too. The running attacks and such, like, they just have a very, very good, well-rounded moveset from everything from jump attacks to two-handed attacks to regular attacks. Curved Swords are excellent. And we have two Bandit Curved Swords in Blood with Seppuku. We have the Dragon Communion Seal, White Mask, Raptor's Black Feathers, Claw Talisman, Lord of Blood's Exaltation, Melissa's Prosthesis, Rotten Sword Insignia, Thorny Tier, Faith Tier. And before we go into version 2, we have 60 Vigor, 20 Mind, 45 Dexterity, and 45 Arcane. We have Golden Vow and Flame Grip Me Strength as our buffs, and these are really quality as you get to higher levels. And the reason why I love them so much is because I made one of my favorite builds out of them, to be honest. I use Flaming Strike on both of these. You get a B in Flame Art. At rune level 150, you'll get 750 AR on each, and Fire is a good damage type in Elden Ring for the base game. That's probably going to change in DLC, but this allows for a lot of versatility too. Which is why these are definitely number one in my list here today. I do enjoy Curved Swords. We have two Bandit Curved Swords in Flame Art with Flaming Strike. We have the Giant Seal, Raptor's Black Feathers. Stats are on the right: Claw Talisman, Rotten Wing Sword Insignia, Fire Scorpion Charm, Shard of Alexandria, Flame Tier, Thorny Tier, Golden Vow, and Flame Grip Strength. Thanks for watching this one. Thanks for tuning into ranking every single weapon class with a build, which was really fun, to be honest. And I really feel this way about these weapon classes. I rank them in the way that I see them. Be sure to sub if you're not subbed yet. Elden Ring DLC is right around the corner. Much love and appreciation to this community. It has been phenomenal. The Discord is in the pinned comment below. Be sure to join that too. It's going to get real busy soon. I will catch everybody soon.